Okay, let's dive into this. When you hear the word globalization, what's the very first thing that pops into your head? Probably the internet, right? Or maybe massive container ships or international flights crossing the globe in a matter of hours. But what if I told you the true blueprint for our entire global economy was drawn up thousands of years before literally any of those existed? Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to see exactly how ancient merchants, not modern technology, built the very first global economy.
On one hand, we've got the classic hallmarks of modern globalization: airplanes, the web, container ships moving billions of dollars of cargo every single day. And on the other hand, we have the ancient equivalents: camel caravans, the invention of writing, and these sprawling early maritime networks. Now, sure, the tools have completely transformed, but the underlying principles, connecting markets, managing risks, moving goods across vast distances, those are exactly the same today as they were millennia ago.
So here is the map of our journey today. We're going to start with the globalization myth, then uncover the commercial blueprint, look at mitigating risk, dive into empire infrastructure, explore information and trust, and finally wrap up with the timeless logic of trade. Let's get to it. Part 1. The globalization myth. Who really built the global economy?
Long before Rome conquered the Mediterranean, and way before the Silk Road became a household name, or modern capitalism for that matter, the foundational connections of our world were not forged by conquering governments. They were built by everyday merchants. Just think about the sheer scale of ancient traded goods: gold, silver, textiles, precious stones, wine, ideas, and spices that were no joke, sometimes literally worth their weight in gold. Thousands of years ago, traders were crossing brutal deserts and sailing unmapped seas just to move this stuff. The sheer scale and variety is just staggering. They were connecting completely different civilizations, creating this massive web that let humanity share resources on a truly global scale.
Part 2. Inventing the commercial blueprint. Solving the distance problem.
To really understand how they pulled this off, we have to travel back about 5,000 years to the emerging cities of Mesopotamia. Now, the people there had incredibly fertile land, great for crops, but they completely lacked timber, stone, and metals. So merchants saw an opportunity to connect regions that specialized in different resources. But moving goods over those distances? Absolute logistical nightmare. I mean, how do you know what you own? How much does someone owe you? Who delivered what? And what happens if the merchant isn't even there when the deal goes down?
The answer? Writing. And honestly, this is kind of hilarious. The very first writing wasn't some beautiful poetry or an epic historical saga. Actually, scratch that. It was basically a boring tax receipt or a trade contract. The very first accountants created writing on clay tablets simply to record grain, livestock, loans, and agreements. Once you could write down a debt, you didn't have to rely on human memory. Commerce became vastly more organized. These early traders literally invented the commercial blueprint.
Part 3. Mitigating risk across oceans. The Maritime Revolution.
Eventually, all this commerce hit the water, and the ancient Mediterranean became a vast network. Ships became vital economic infrastructure because, well, a boat can carry way more than a camel. But maritime trade was notoriously risky. Storms could wipe out your entire fortune in seconds, and pirates were a constant, terrifying threat. To survive, ancient entrepreneurs developed a genius system. Step 1. Diversify cargo across multiple ships. Step 2. Share the investment with partners. Step 3. Share the profits and, crucially, share the risk. So the crucial point is that they figured out risk is way easier to swallow when it's distributed. They perfectly mirrored modern finance thousands of years before anyone wrote an economics textbook.
Now, the absolute masters of this maritime game were the Phoenicians. You probably know them for that insanely expensive purple dye derived from sea snails, a huge status symbol back then. But they were so much more than just luxury dye sellers. They were network builders. They established a massive chain of settlements all across the Mediterranean. Each port provided supplies, fresh intel, and new customers. The physical network itself became their greatest economic asset.
Part 4. Empires as economic infrastructure. Paving the way for markets.
While merchants built the networks, they got a massive inadvertent boost from some of the biggest governments in history, which provided exactly what trade needs most: stability. Starting 5,000 years ago in Mesopotamia with writing. Fast forward to 2,500 years ago, and the Persia Empire builds the Royal Road, making travel so much safer. Then, 2,300 years ago, Alexander the Great connects Greece all the way to Central Asia. And by 2,000 years ago, the Roman Empire had created massive, unified markets with famous roads, ports, and a widely accepted currency. Successive empires laid the groundwork, proving that infrastructure absolutely creates markets.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the pure foundational simplicity of Roman economic logic. Step 1, produce where costs are lower. Step 2, transport to where demand is higher. Step 3, profit from the difference. This is why grain from Egypt fed distant cities and olive oil traveled across continents. They weren't operating in a modern capitalist economy, but this is literally one of the oldest, most reliable business models in human history.
Part 5. Information, Credit, and Trust. The invisible infrastructure.
Has routes extended beyond empires, like the complex web we call the Silk Road. Goods changed hands many, many times. And out there, the most valuable commodity wasn't silk or horses. It was information. Knowing where a war was breaking out or where a specific product was scarce reduced catastrophic risk and made fortunes. But as networks expanded, they hit a massive roadblock. How do you move value without physically moving all the money? I mean, dragging heavy chests of gold across a pirate-infested sea or a desert full of bandits? Terrible idea. Ancient merchants constantly had to solve this universal economic problem to expand safely. Their brilliant solution was credit, but not the credit we know today. In a world without modern credit scores, your reputation literally was your credit. Merchants used family networks, religious ties, and professional associations to build trust. If you cheated someone, word spread like wildfire, and your ability to trade was instantly over. It's exactly like a modern company's brand or an investor's track record today. Trust was, and still remains, the invisible infrastructure of commerce.
Part 6. The timeless logic of trade. From monsoons to smartphones. As global trade really matured, merchants even figured out how to use the predictable monsoon winds of the Indian Ocean to sail seasonally between Africa, Arabia, India, and Southeast Asia. They essentially turned the ocean itself into a piece of natural economic infrastructure. And this brilliantly illustrates just how shockingly modern this ancient system was. Think about the ancient silk network. A product went from a Chinese producer to a Central Asian merchant to a Persian trader, finally reaching a Roman customer who never even met the creator. Now think about your modern smartphone. Designed in one country, components from another, assembled elsewhere, and sold globally. The network, not a single company, creates the value.
It really all boils down to what we can call the ancient merchant's formula. Buy where abundant, sell where scarce. Reduce risk, build trust, repeat. This was the core calculation of these ancient entrepreneurs who looked at a massive world and saw pure opportunity. And you know what? If you look at the absolute largest global corporations today, they are still operating on this exact timeless foundation. Only the speed and the scale have changed.
Which brings us to our final thought for today's explainer. The greatest invention wasn't a product. It was the network. The very first global economy wasn't dreamed up in a modern corporate boardroom or decreed by kings. It was built one transaction, one caravan, one ship at a time by merchants whose curiosity and risk tolerance connected the entire world. So, the next time a package arrives at your door from halfway across the planet, ask yourself, are we truly living in an age of unprecedented modern technology, or are we just running the exact same software designed by a desert trader 5,000 years ago? Thanks for learning with us, and we'll catch you in the next explainer.